We have spent the last 36 hours focusing on what went on for 3.5 hours behind closed doors over in Alaska. U.S. versus Russia, kinda, really Russia versus Ukraine. It would have been great to hear that Russia agreed to a ceasefire and gradually we're going to leave all their stolen land from Ukraine and just go back to their borders. But that was never going to happen. In reality, this was just the beginning of the end, I believe, of the nearly 4-year war. Why would I say that? Well, the status quo is not okay with us, not okay with Ukraine, not okay with Europe, and dare I say Russia. More importantly, it's not okay with President Trump. And he has an A plan and he's got a B plan. This is the A plan.
And the president, as a mediator, was looking for ways to solve the crisis. He understands that it is for the Ukrainians to decide how they might land swap, how they might make a deal with the Russians on different territories there. But that's why Zelensky and the Europeans are coming to the White House on Monday to make those decisions themselves.
It's up to the Ukrainians to make these conditions. We have to make enough progress so that we can sit down President Zelensky and President Putin in the same place, which is what President Zelensky has been asking for, and reach a final agreement that ends this war.
Yes, for Ukraine and Russia to reach an agreement. We're trying to bring both sides together. So what did we learn from this summit? Number one, Putin wants to freeze the lines he has grabbed and the entire Donbass region, even areas he cannot take militarily, which is rich in iron, rich in coal, rich in rare earth. While I can't see dislodging Russia from the 18% of Ukraine that they stole, I can't see them being gifted the strategic land known as the Fortress Belt either. We also know there is no immediate ceasefire. What else have we learned? Well, that the Russians didn't ask for two disputed regions, Sumy and Kharkiv. That's significant. And Vladimir Putin no longer objects to security guarantees, which include international forces, which is the only true block to another invasion. But still, some say it's not a win without a ceasefire.
Not only do you need a deal, you need a deal that's verifiable, that's enforceable, and that's enduring. If you don't achieve that, then I think you could have a ceasefire for a few months, a few weeks, and then the war will start again and more people will die. That's not the outcome we're interested in.
Right. So why not hit them with secondary sanctions already? Give the Ukrainians $300 billion in frozen Russian funds. Slap tariffs on China. Slap them on Brazil and Turkey for doing business in Russia, like buying their cheap oil. We could. We still might, but not yet. Why? Simple. It eliminates peace as an option.
The moment the president puts those additional sanctions, that's the end of the talks. You've basically locked in at least another year to year and a half of war and death and destruction. We may unfortunately wind up there, but we don't want to wind up there. We want to wind up with a peace deal that ends this war so Ukraine can go on with the rest of their lives and rebuild their country and be assured that this is never going to happen again. That's the goal here. We're going to do everything possible to make that happen if it's doable.
It's doable. And frustratingly true. Maybe a ceasefire is not what we want. As for what was accomplished Friday leading into the meeting with our European allies tomorrow, including President Zelensky, all the issues are being confronted and addressed in a compressed timeline. As for the optics, I loved the flyover. Could have done without the red carpet, but I love the theme on the step and repeat behind the leaders. They're focusing on pursuing peace. But the usual critics lined up.
But although it was presented as perhaps a show of power by being at a U.S. Air Force base with the flight passing of the B-52s, it did certainly look much more like a show of appreciation for Vladimir Putin.
Vladimir Putin got the red carpet treatment on American soil. Donald Trump got flattered by Vladimir Putin.
He left without Trump even applying any additional sanctions or severe measures, such as President Trump said that he would. So I guess you call that Putin 1, Trump 0.
I sense that they would have been critical regardless. And in terms of the final score, it is not the final score. If you feel, and I love Ambassador Volker, but if you feel that way, that it's 1-0, just keep in mind, this game has just begun, but it is turning around the back stretch. Stop focusing on where the process starts, which was Friday, and look at where the finish line is.
To all these media analysts who say this was a bust, that's ridiculous. We have progress we didn't have before. We have momentum for peace. We'll see where it goes. So I'll leave it up to Trump.
So joining me now, Fox News senior strategic analyst, General Jack Keane, four-star general. He also writes the Institute for the Study of War. He gives you an idea of what's happening almost as it happens in real time. General, what was your takeaway from Friday?
Yeah, well, I think the major things that happened are largely positive. And one is Putin asked for this meeting. That in itself was a big statement, an in-person meeting. The president wanted Zelensky at it. Putin said no, but tentatively agreed to the possibility of that based on how the initial meeting went with President Trump. And why did Putin want the meeting? Well, I think he wants to avoid tariffs and sanctions for sure. And he would like to talk to the president and wind up putting some pressure on Zelensky as a result of it, try to separate the president from Zelensky and from the Euros, who are supporting him. So, obviously he has some objectives here, to be sure. The president deserves credit for getting him there. He would not have gotten there without the threat of the sanctions and what happened in India with the 50% tariff that's been slapped on him. And I've always believed that our adversaries have had to reset and reassess as a result of a very successful military strike on Iran, which ended their nuclear program and begun to reset the table in the Middle East. And everybody has paid attention to that in terms of its decisiveness and certainly the geopolitical impacts that are coming from it. And it says unstated that President Trump is a no-nonsense, serious person. He certainly wants peace, but he's not going to hesitate to use force to stop something bad from happening. So I think, put all that together, Putin comes to meet with President Trump. I think coming out of that, are we disappointed that we didn't get a ceasefire and the killing stopped? Yeah, of course. And I think President Trump feels the same way about it. But the fact that they didn't get into the specifics of what took place and where the agreements were and where the disagreements still lie, because there's so much work in progress there, people walk away and say, well, there's nothing there. Nothing happened but a red carpet and a flyover. Well, that's nonsense. A lot of things have happened here. And the reality is there's a potential trilateral meeting, including President Zelensky. I think the president's going to assess that based on what is happening here in Washington, D.C. And let's look at this. We got all the senior leaders in Europe. They're here now for a meeting tomorrow with the president. And this includes the Secretary General. All the top leaders of the European countries are here. And obviously President Zelensky is here with his team. And what are they all working on? They're all working on peace with President Trump. That in itself is a huge step forward to see that kind of unity here. Very positive thing going forward. I think really
so General,
a lot of discussion tomorrow, Brian, is...
Right. Go ahead.
A lot of discussion tomorrow is going to center around one of the positive things that has come out of the Friday meeting. And that is security guarantees were asked for, and Putin said yes. That's a reasonable approach. That's a statement, it's not action. But it's something that has never been said before, and a lot of time on Monday is going to be devoted to what those security guarantees are. And if those security guarantees take the form of Article 5-like, troops on the ground backed up by air power, to make certain that to provide a deterrence against Putin advancing, we have a ceasefire, there's some kind of permanent agreement in place, and you have those security guarantees that it holds in place. If that is real and it takes form, that is a game changer in of itself. And that is an incredible positive outcome from Friday's meeting. That is what President Zelensky has wanted from the beginning, and that is what the United States wants.
So I want you to take a look at this map, what Russia wants. They want areas of the Donbass that they have not won, that's been fortified by the Ukrainians since 2014, and it's vital because it also provides a highway right to Kharkiv. They could swap that for Sumy and Kharkiv. Your thoughts about that one area that it looks like Zelensky does not want to give up, and I'm sympathetic towards his belief.
Well, as we've talked about it, for a week now, there's a fortified piece of that terrain in there, encompasses 5 cities that they haven't been able to take in the last 26 months, and they've thrown their army at it. They tried in 2014 with considerably less than an army, failed miserably. And based on our analysis at the Institute for the Study of War, and I know where our military analysis is on it, the guys that are in Europe looking at this every day, they couldn't take it in the foreseeable future either. But that everything begins to change in terms of what land is available and what swaps should be made if those Article 5 guarantees are really real. And that actually, this is Zelensky's issue, all right, shaped by the Europeans and also discussed by the president and his team. He has to make the decisions about what land to give up. And could he get portions of Zaporizhia or portions of Kherson or others in return? But I think everything is on the table given the Article 5 guarantees, General, we're gonna have to leave. If they're real.
I know. And you're pumped up by that, and so am I. Hopefully this continues to make progress, and the Russians stand by what they said in that meeting. General Jack Keane, you're the best. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.